Chapter 34. For a few seconds, everyone on the street or huddled in the doorways stared silently up at the ship. It had not landed. It had simply appeared. Rash realized it must have landed while still invisible, and once it was down, the aliens had turned their gadget off. He felt a sudden renewed chill. If the creatures were giving up an advantage like that... Then the first blast struck. One of the police cruisers exploded in blue-white fire, and, an instant later, exploded again in yellow flame as the gas tank detonated. Cops ducked and dived in all directions looking for cover. That had apparently been a test shot. Before the echoes had died away, the actual barrage began. Blue-white flared up on all sides as vehicles were scattered like toys and building facades crumbled. Schaefer ran, dodged, and dived for cover, landing beside Rash in the sheltered doorway of the camera shop. "Jesus," he said, as he sprawled on the sidewalk. "I think they're upset." "This isn't just for fun, Schaefer," Rash shouted. "They're going to bring down half the city." Schaefer looked at him, then rolled over and looked up at the ship and the ongoing pyrotechnics. He saw that the buildings on both sides were still standing. The aliens were shooting at the vehicles in the street and at the entrances, but they weren't really doing anywhere near as much damage as they might have. Schaefer had seen what a group on foot could do when they'd taken out Echeverri's camp. He'd seen a ship reduce Carr's building to rubble in a matter of minutes. Somehow, he suspected that the ship out there could have done a lot more damage, if that's what the bastards really wanted. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "maybe I was wrong. Maybe they aren't upset. I think they're just clearing the area so we won't ambush them as they emerge. Hell, if they chase enough people away, maybe I'll finally be able to afford a decent apartment." Rash was too shocked to react to Schaefer's attempt at humour. Out in the street, Captain McComb crouched by one of the cars that was still intact and shouted into the radio, "Sweet Jesus, we need help up here! I've never seen anything like it! That son of a bitch Phillips!" Then abruptly, the barrage stopped. Echoes rolled away down the avenue and up the streets on either side. In the sudden silence, the survivors on the ground peered cautiously from whatever shelter they had found. "Now what?" Rash asked. "Now they come after us," Schaefer replied. "That was just to drive us back. Look." Rash looked and saw an opening appear in the side of the ship. Something shimmered in the shadow there, then the shimmer dropped to the street level below. A second shimmer followed, and a third. Rash ducked back out of sight. McComb didn't notice the shimmerings. He didn't know what to look for. He saw the door open, but he didn't see anything emerge. What do you want?" he shouted. "You want someone to come in there and parley? Is that it?" "Is that it?" his own voice called back. And then, suddenly, one of the creatures was standing over him, looking down, its face hidden behind a metal mask. What are you?" McComb gasped. The monster didn't answer. The black thing on its shoulder swiveled, aimed, and fired, blowing a hole through Captain McComb's chest. "There's one of them!" one of Carr's men shouted. "Over there!" He lifted his Uzi and sprayed bullets at the creature standing over the dead cop. It flickered and vanished. The hood stopped firing, lowered the gun, and stared. "Jesus," he said. "He disappeared." Then the blue-white bolt from the shoulder cannon tore through his side, spinning him off his feet. He was dead by the time he hit the sidewalk. "McComb's dead!" Rash shouted. "And where next, if we don't keep moving?" Schaefer said. He stared through the mask. "They're not keeping any kind of formation. They're just milling around out there, picking targets at random. If we can lay down a fire pattern, drive them back." He looked around for allies and spotted a cluster of Carr's men, spraying bullets in all directions. "Lay a pattern!" he shouted. "Push them back towards the ship!" The thugs paid no attention. Schaefer swore and charged out towards them, firing wildly to cover his own movements. He had almost reached the group of outlaws when the shape of one of the aliens, red and gold through the mask, reared up before him. Oh, shit! The thing hit him with the back of its hand, sending him flying. Then, when he landed, it stepped over to him, reached down, and snatched the mask away from him. That finally got the attention of the nearby humans, and a barrage of gunfire drove the monster away before it could finish him. "Damn," Schaefer said, as he crawled for shelter. "Helmet's gone. We're blind. And they know it." Blue-white cannon fire took down two of Carr's recruits, and in the instant's distraction, Rash dashed forward to help Schaefer up from the pavement. Together, the two ran for shelter. A wild shot tore through Rash's shoulder, and he fell back, scattering what remained of a broken display window. Schaefer called his name and looked wildly about for somewhere he could take his fallen partner, somewhere safe. He didn't see anything like safety, but he did see reinforcements coming. At least, he hoped they were reinforcements. A squad of men in olive drab were charging up 3rd Avenue, M16s firing. And one of the men, Schaefer saw, was General Phillips. "Schaefer!" the old man called. "God damn you, you son of a bitch! You had to do this the hard way. The shit's really gonna hit the fan now." "What's next, General?" Schaefer shouted back. "Gonna take out my boys for 'em? Still hoping to negotiate?" "Shit," Phillips said. "Maybe that's what they want down in Washington. But I was never much of a diplomat. I may not have shown it, Schaefer, but I do know what side I'm on. And it isn't some goddamn monsters. I've got gunships, helicopters, coming this way." "Think it'll help?" Schaefer asked. "You know how many ships they have? Where they are?" "Nope," Phillips replied. "Can't track 'em that well. They make our stealth technology look like bright red billboards with targets on 'em. But goddamn it, it's our planet." The second-story wall blew out of the building above them just then. Neither man had seen whether alien cannon fire or a wild shot from one of the defenders' heavier weapons was responsible, but they both bent over and sheltered their heads with their arms as debris pelted them. Then Phillips looked up and looked around. "Can't see a goddamn sign of them," he said. "These damned foreigners are really starting to stick in my craw. Why don't the yellow bastards show themselves?" "Why should they?" Schaefer asked as he scanned the street. "It's—" Wait a minute. Something had caught his eye and combined with a memory. "You watch Rash," he said. He ran forward into the street before Phillips could react and began pouring through the wreckage of one of Macomb's cruisers. He found what he wanted, a fireman's wrench. He hefted it and ran for the nearest hydrant. He twisted the cap off the front, then turned the hydrant on full. Water sprayed out against the side of a burning cruiser and then up, arcing into the street. As the water showered back, blue sparks crawled across shimmering outlines, and two alien monsters appeared. Carr, a block away, saw what Schaefer had done. He didn't have a wrench, but he had something else. He blew the top off another hydrant, sending another spray of water spilling into the street. That evened things up a little. Both soldiers and gangbangers had targets now. Big, fast-moving, armoured targets. But targets. Rash, lying in the store window with Phillips standing by his feet, heard a rhythmic beating somewhere overhead. At first, he thought it was some new attack. Then, that it was the blood pounding in his head. Then the first chopper came into view over the rooftops, and Phillips began shouting, "Clear the streets! Clear the streets, goddammit!" Rash forced himself to sit up, to watch what was happening. Everything seemed darker than it should have been. The dawn seemed almost to have faded back into the night. Rash hoped his eyes were okay. He blinked and looked out at an expanse of twisted metal, burning wreckage, and bloody corpses. Human fighters were dodging and hiding, fading away, while the aliens stood proudly in the street, moving in sudden quick zigzags whenever they sensed a threat or a target. One was closing in on Schaefer, cutting off each attempt at retreat the big man made, cornering him against the building of the opposite side of the street from Rash's perch. "Schaefer!" Rash shouted, but his shout was lost in a sudden new, louder rumble from overhead. He looked up, past the spaceship, past the rooftops, past the V formation of a half-dozen gunships, at the black clouds above. Lightning flashed, and thunder rumbled again, and the first fat drops of rain spattered down. A cool wind blew in from the side streets, rustling clothing, sending litter skittering in the gutters, twisting the flames from the wrecked vehicles into spirals. The heat wave had finally broken. The predatory creature pursuing Schaefer stopped, and, like Rash, it looked upward. All around, the aliens stopped. Rash watched them considering the weather, the choppers, the city. He wondered if they were communicating with each other somehow. They weren't speaking, but maybe they were telepathic. Maybe they could read each other's scents or heat patterns. "Is that it?" one of them bellowed abruptly, in McComb's voice. The one that had cornered Schaefer turned back towards the detective for a moment. Its right hand, the one with the two jagged blades, slashed out, drawing two red lines across Schaefer's chest. Not to kill, but simply to mark, to let Schaefer know he was beaten. Then the thing's other claw lashed out, but in a far subtler and more complex motion, as it picked the homing device from Schaefer's neck. Schaefer screamed, fell to his knees, and clutched at the bleeding wound. But the blood was seeping, not spouting. The carotid had not been cut. He knelt, his hand on his neck, and watched as the alien hunters marched back to their ship. One by one, they leaped lightly up the open hatch, casually jumping a height no human could possibly manage unassisted. 3 of the things had been taken down in the fighting, one way or another. The survivors gathered these 3 up as they returned to their ship. The humans watched as the monsters withdrew, taking their dead with them. When the last of the aliens was aboard and the hatchway closed, the humans emerged slowly from cover, moving warily out into the open. Unearthly engines screamed, and the spaceship began to move, to push south down 3rd Avenue, then to rise, quickly gathering speed and altitude. Its belly fin sliced a yard-wide, 20-foot path through the asphalt before coming clear. The ship vanished from sight before it had cleared the buildings on either side, and the sound cut off abruptly. The invisibility screen was back in place. Maybe we scared them off," Phillips said. "They're too smart to start a fight they can't finish." "Can't finish?" Schaefer stared at Phillips in disbelief. "Shit, they could have scragged the entire city without breaking a sweat, if that was what they wanted." "So why didn't they?" Carr asked. "Because that's not what they were here for," Schaefer said, looking upward to where the ship was faintly visible as a hole in the intensifying rain. "They weren't here to wreck the city. They were here to have a good time. It got out of hand, though. It wasn't sport anymore. It's wet. It's cold. It's just no more fun." He turned away. "That's what they wanted, General. No invasions, no treaties, just some good old boys out on a tear. And when it isn't fun anymore, you pack up and you go home. You go look at your fancy radar, General. I'll bet the whole fleet's leaving." He grimaced. "And Carr, I'd suggest you get lost," he said. "Lunchtime today, I'm coming after you. But right now, you're still clear as far as I'm concerned." Carr grinned. "See you then, Schaefer," he said. He turned away and began swaggering west on 37th, a machine gun on his shoulder, and Schaefer and the soldiers just watched him go. The other surviving outlaws also began to fade away into the side streets, some taking their weapons, others dropping them here and there along the avenue. Schaefer turned back to Phillips. "General, call off your choppers. Hunting season's over, and the hunters are going home." He grimaced. "See you next year."